The throne room was silent, save for the slow drip of melted wax from the towering candles. Draped in embroidered silk, the king's body lay unnaturally still, his skin pale as marble. Courtiers stood at a distance, their whispers heavy with dread, not because their sovereign had died, but because of the manner of his death. Two royal physicians, their hands trembling, stepped forward. With a careful motion, they folded back the funeral cloth. Gasps rippled through the room. His lips gleamed faintly, as though kissed by the sun. The teeth, the gums, even the tongue, bore a subtle metallic shimmer. A voice, low and deliberate, cuts through the stillness. For centuries, gold has been a symbol of power, immortality, and divine right. But for this king, it became his poison. This is a story of the ruler who drank liquid gold until his organs melted from within. The death of a monarch is always a dangerous moment, but this one could ignite the realm like dry tinder. The king has left no clear air, and already the air in the palace corridors hums with treachery. Rival factions sharpen their schemes, whispering in the dark about who should claim the empty throne. But this is more than a political crisis. It is a humiliation. Kings are meant to die on the battlefield, their banners stained with glory. Not here, in a perfumed chamber, their bodies decaying from within. By dawn, the rumors have already escaped the palace walls. Some claim it was poison, slipped into his wine by an ambitious duke. Others insist it was suicide, a desperate bid to cheat an even darker fate. And then there are those who whisper that the king's own obsession led him to drink the very thing that killed him. The year was the late 15th century, a Europe brimming with superstition, ambition, and the restless hunger of kings who believed the natural order could be bent to their will. In this world, alchemy was not a parlor trick for dreamers. It was a frontier of science, an art practiced by scholars, physicians, and court magicians with the same seriousness as astronomy or medicine. Monarchs across the continent pursued the same elusive prize, the conquest of death itself. They hunted for the fabled elixir of life, the philosopher's stone, and remedies that could hold back the creeping rut of age. Gold, the eternal metal, was more than currency, it was a divine material. If it could resist time and decay, perhaps it could do the same for flesh and bone. Physicians spoke of its incorruptible essence, and quacks whispered of golden elixirs that could infuse the body with immortality. Wealthy rulers toyed with strange and dangerous cures, powdered pearls dissolved in wine, emerald ground to dust, mercury stirred into sweetened tonics. But this king, he took it further than any before him. To him, gold was not simply a symbol of his power, it would be the substance that kept him alive forever. He was born into a dynasty that measured its greatness in ounces of gold. His earliest memories were not of his mother's voice or the warmth of the sun, but of the cold gleam of wealth. The rattle in his hand carved from gilded wood, the crib inlaid with delicate gold leaf that caught the morning light. Even as an infant, he slept in the shadow of opulence. As he grew, he inherited not only a kingdom but a legacy of vanity. His tutors taught him the arts of war and diplomacy, but his true education came from the palaces around him, walls lined with gilded frescoes, banquet tables set with goblets heavier than the wine they held. But beneath the glitter ran a dark current. The boy became a man haunted by the memory of his father's slow decay, the once mighty king reduced to a trembling shadow, breath wheezing through cracked lips, flesh growing cold long before the grave claimed him. Death, to this young ruler, was not just an inevitability. It was an insult. Chroniclers describe him as handsome yet vain, courageous yet incapable of moderation. His charisma drew scholars, astrologers, and alchemists to his court, all whispering promises of agelessness. Among them was one alchemist who dared to speak of a secret older than kingdoms, that gold, if prepared with care, could be consumed as a liquid to strengthen the organs, purify the blood, and hold death at bay. The king listened, and, fatally, he believed, the fever had nearly claimed him. For 3 days and nights, the court had prepared for his death, the corridors thick with incense and whispered prayers. But on the 4th morning, the king rose from his bed, pale, gaunt, and trembling, yet alive. To him, it was not recovery. It was a warning from death itself. Next time, I will not miss. In the weeks that followed, his hunger for a cure grew feverish. The palace became a laboratory, corridors echoing with the hiss of boiling vessels, the scent of strange herbs and heated metals. One evening, under the watchful eyes of nobles and servants, the alchemist approached the throne with a covered goblet. He uncovered it to reveal a thick, shimmering liquid, gold melted into honey, infused with secret herbs. Its surface glowed in the candlelight like captured sunlight. The king raised the cup high. "If gold guards my kingdom," he declared, voice ringing across the hall, "it shall guard my soul." He drank deep. A warmth spread through him, swift and intoxicating. His pulse quickened, his limbs felt lighter, and his eyes gleamed with renewed vigor. In that moment, he believed he had trapped death itself. The transformation was slow at first, so gradual that it almost seemed like the potion was working. Each morning, the king would summon the alchemist, demanding a fresh goblet of aqua aurea. Sometimes, when the mood struck him, he would drink it twice a day, laughing as a thick golden liquid slid down his throat. The court began to fracture. The devout whispered that their ruler had touched the divine, that the gods themselves had blessed his veins with gold. Others, more cautious, more fearful, muttered behind closed doors that the king was courting death in a goblet. Then came the changes. His skin, once warm with a flush of youth, took on a strange yellow pallor, as though the gold was seeping outward. His breath carried a faint metallic tang, sharp enough to turn the stomach. Physicians noted the swelling in his hands, the stiffness in his joints, the twisting pain in his belly. But each time they spoke of moderation, he waved them away, accusing them of cowardice or treachery. His temper began to swing like a pendulum. At times he was euphoric, generous, and almost childlike in his delight. Hours later, he might erupt in violent rage over the smallest perceived slight. Foreign envoys returned to their homelands with strange tales of the gilded king, a man who, even under the flicker of torchlight, seemed to shimmer, his skin glinting faintly as though the gold lived inside him. To them, it was both wondrous and deeply unsettling, the beauty of a statue with the breath of a man. The king, oblivious to the whispers, believed only one thing: death had been cheated, and his reign would last forever. The great hall was alive with music, the scent of roasted meats and spice wine heavy in the air. Nobles laughed over overflowing goblets, minstrels plucked at strings, and the king, clad in embroidered silks that shimmered like molten metal, presided over it all. He raised his cup to toast another year of his reign. But as the words left his mouth, his hand froze mid-air. His face contorted, lips curling back in sudden agony. A gasp rippled through the hall as he clutched his abdomen, knocking the goblet from his grasp. The golden liquid inside splattered across the marble, mingling with a darker, stranger fluid now spilling from his own mouth, a thick yellow vomit streak with tiny metallic flecks that glittered under the torchlight. Courtiers recoiled. The musicians faltered into silence. Physicians rushed forward, robes billowing, their voices trembling as they pleaded for him to abandon the gold. They spoke of poison, of organs rotting from within. But the king, pale and trembling, waved them away with a defiant snarl. "This is no sickness," he rasped. "I am purging impurities. Make it stronger." When he rose, it was with effort, his frame frail, his skin stretched and jaundiced, his eyes hollowed deep into shadow. The palace was shrouded in the still, suffocating quiet of midwinter. Outside, snow clung to the stone battlements like pale, frozen moss, and the air inside the king's chamber was thick with the bitter smoke of burning myrrh. The once grand ruler lay sunken into his vast bed, dwarfed by its silken drapes, his body reduced a little more than skin stretched over brittle bone. His breath came in shallow, ragged pulls, each one seeming to scrape against his ribs. Summoning what little strength remained, he croaked an order. The alchemist, robed in dark crimson, face half hidden by shadow, shuffled forward, clutching a goblet that glowed faintly in the firelight. Inside, molten gold, cooled to a thick, viscous liquid, swirled sluggishly, far more concentrated than any dose he had ever taken. The king's trembling hands wrapped around the cup. His eyes, sunken yet burning with feverish pride, locked on the alchemist's. Without hesitation, he drank, slow, deliberate gulps, the metallic sheen catching on his cracked lips. A low, eerie laugh rumbled from his chest, echoing through the chamber, but it caught, twisted, and broke into convulsive cough. The goblet slipped from his fingers, clattering against the marble floor. Hours later, the chamber was filled with stifled gasps and the reek of sickness. The king writhed, his skin hot to the touch, eyes rolling back. His final whisper, hoarse, almost reverent, was, "I am becoming eternal." When he finally lay still, his body was disturbingly heavy, the pallor of his skin tinged with a faint, unnatural shimmer. Physicians who dared to cut him open recoiled. Golden deposits clung to the lining of his stomach, streaked his intestines, and crusted even the walls of his heart, as though the metal had begun to claim him from within. By dawn, the alchemist was gone. His workshop stood abandoned, its hearth cold, its shelves bare. Some whispered that the king had him quietly executed before the truth could spread. Others swore they saw him fleeing under moonlight, a sack of gold glinting at his back. Inside the palace, the council sealed the royal chambers and declared the cause of death a private matter of state. Guard patrolled with sharper eyes, silencing gossip. Yet in the kitchens and servant halls, tongues wagged freely. The truth was too strange to contain. Soon, the streets were alive with mischief. Minstrels plucked lutes in taverns, singing verses about the king who ate his own crown. Carved puppets in market squares acted out the scene in crude parody, a golden goblet clutched in trembling hands. The people laughed, but beneath their laughter lay something sharper, the sound of a kingdom quietly losing its fear. In the decades that followed, the king's death became a puzzle for scholars and a feast for storytellers. Some chroniclers blamed pure gold poisoning, claiming the molten metal had scorched his organ from within. Others argued the true killer was a volatile brew of gold, mercury, and other secret alchemical tinctures, a toxic cocktail disguised as a cure. Priests thundered from pulpits about the sin of vanity, using the tale to warn nobles against chasing unnatural beauty or power. In royal courts, his name was whispered as a grim lesson in the cost of blind trust. Laws were drafted forbidding the use of certain alchemical elixirs, but the ban only pushed the practice into candlelit basements and hidden forest huts. For centuries after, strange deaths would still surface, each one reigniting the old, glimmering memory of the king who drank gold. The king's final chapter was not written in royal decrees or triumphant victories, but in the quiet horror of his own ambition turned fatal. He had sought to bind his flesh to the eternal, to make his body as untouchable as his jeweled throne. Yet the very gold he prized above all else seeped into his veins and rotted him from within. His downfall became a parable repeated across generations, that even the most coveted substance can transform into poison when worshipped without restraint. It was not merely gold that killed him, but the insatiable hunger for more beauty, more power, more life. In the end, his glittering dream dissolved into dust, leaving only the truth. The pursuit of immortality often hastens death, and the treasures we cling to most tightly can be the hands that pull us into the grave.